This segment is brought to you by Trap Chevrolet. We're always on your side.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I am your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And we're always glad to bring you information, especially as it relates to our seafood industry and how it relates to what's happening here in our own backyard, because we now have this new Grand Isle branded oysters, and it's called Grand Isle Jewels. They're off-bottom oysters. And here to tell us more about that is Kelsey Scram. She's the Director of Marketing and Communications for Jedco. Kelsey, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This is such a cool idea. I got to tell you, for people in our area and for really everywhere, because we're going to be able to share these all over the world, just tell us a little bit about how it came to be that we were able to get these Grand Isle Jewels and a little more about them specifically.
Yeah, so Grand Isle has a really proud oyster legacy. The oyster industry had been booming in Grand Isle for over 150 years, but because of hurricanes and other environmental issues, production really dropped off to almost zero in the
Mm,
last 45 years. And so, this new farming technique where the oysters are grown in floating cages as opposed to being grown on the seabed have really helped bring the oyster industry back to Grand Isle. And so, Jedco really saw an opportunity to capitalize on the work being done in Grand Isle to really elevate and celebrate these boutique off bottom oysters in this part of the state. So, we worked with the oyster farmers, with Louisiana Sea Grant, with Grand Isle Port Commission to launch the Grand Isle Jewels oyster brand. And now the message to the restaurants and the customers is really simple and consistent. It's if it's a jewel, it's got to be a Grand Isle off bottom oyster. So we really love that.
right,
And the really cool thing too is that this doesn't replace any of the individual businesses or their brand. So we're
right.
kind of thinking of it as like a unifying brand where all of the oyster farmers are elevated under this specific Grand Isle Jewels piece.
Yeah, I love it. And the exciting thing is that they're a little bit different. Tell us the difference between what we know, those of us that have lived here our whole lives, or people that have eaten oysters their whole lives, as a traditional oyster versus these what are called Grand Isle Jewels.
Yeah, one of the things that is really, really cool about it is that they taste a little bit different. So
Okay.
the farmers are putting these in the water consistently, which is about 4 feet deep. They're tending to the crops a lot differently. And we want to make sure that we share too that these oysters are not meant to compete with the traditional oyster industry, but instead to complement it. And so the way that these oysters come to be is they're a little bit smaller, they're a
Hmm.
little bit more delicate, they have a very salty, briny taste to them. Sometimes I feel like one of the farmers told us that it kind of tastes like a little bit of like a umami, like eggy sort of taste. It's
Okay.
very savory. So,
Okay.
and we've tasted them right out of the water, and they're absolutely incredible. They're
Okay.
delicious. So,
Wow.
we really, really we love them. They're great.
And I know, listen, a lot of times oysters are kind of specific to certain months where they say, they're a little bit more plentiful at this time. Tell us how these Grand Isle Jewels are now available much more plentiful, much more often.
Yeah, one of the things that we're really excited about sharing is that these are available more often throughout the year. They have a shorter growing season. So, in about 5 to 6 months, the smaller ones can actually be put on the market. Whereas, like with traditional oyster farming, sometimes it takes up to 2 years for those oysters to get to the point where we're, bringing them to market. So,
Right.
they're we can be a little bit more nimble. The farmers can be a little bit more nimble, and it just adds to the resilience and sustainability of the industry.
Yeah. And again, it's a remarkable industry, and we're so very glad that we have it here in our area. So let's talk a little bit about the grant that was provided and what will be the financial impact of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to mention that Louisiana's seafood industry is really a treasure. It's so important to our culture, our ecology, and our economy. The industry has an annual economic impact of $2.4 billion, and
Mm,
one out of every 70 jobs in the state is connected to Louisiana seafood. So,
mm,
despite its importance, we've really seen that there's been a lot of hardship for this industry. And when for many, many years, Medco has really had a focus on trying to figure out how we could support the resiliency of the industry, how we could support the um the sustainability of the industry. And so we worked with Louisiana Economic Development to secure grant funding, not just for this brand, but also there were some other things that we did to really help boost this industry. We brought some chefs down to Grand Isle a couple of about a year ago. We've done some work with some of the other seafood, the shrimpers, the fishermen. So really, our goal has been to just really try to utilize this funding to support the seafood industry in a on in a big way. And so and really to get back to the jewels product, we want to raise awareness about this premium product. And it's, I think probably the best tasting oyster you'll ever find anywhere on the planet. And our goal too is really to flip the script. So, Grand Isle has been, kind of ground zero for a lot of hurricanes. And so we want it to be known more as the oyster capital of the world. We think this brand really helps that. And so we just really want to share that story and get that word out there. And the grant funding really, really supported that effort.
Well, Louisiana seafood industry is really important. I'm so very glad y'all have been able to partner. Glad that you guys are doing your part with Jedco, and now kind of letting people know that these new Grand Isle jewels are available, and people can be looking out for them. And you want to get some, like you said, they've already got a little bit more natural flavor and more savory flavor than some of our regular oysters. But Kelsey, we appreciate you joining us today to go over all those updates. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular segment, but don't go anywhere. A whole lot more right here on Bayou Time.
This segment was brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs.